Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proper Variant and this is number 65 of the CK3 Dev Diaries. It's a huge one, it's a great one, we're gonna jump into that in a second. I just want to say that ModCon is on the way. There will be much more information coming about ModCon in this very week. Then ModCon itself isn't that far away as well, so I hope that you're excited. I know I am. There's also currently a midsummer sale going on. There will be two links in the description of this video. One link that links you directly to the Paradox store. It is my affiliate link, meaning that whenever you purchase something to no additional cost for yourself, I will get a share of it. So if you want to support me, you can do that right there. There will also be a link to the nexus.gg store of mine, in which you can also purchase various Paradox titles, including CK3, with various levels of discounts. With that being said, why don't we just jump into this dev diary, because this is a huge one. This is about the DLC features when it comes to culture. So the last dev diary was about the culture rework in general, and all of that stuff is free. Now this one is about something else. This one is about hybrid and divergent cultures, and that will be in the Royal Court expansion, meaning it will be included in there. I will be honest with you, I love to complain. I love to bring up topics where I'm like, hey, this isn't right. I would like to see this in a different fashion. And there's some of that in here, but it is very, very little when we compare it to the actual size of this dev diary. This is an actual novel, and it's definitely something that we should take a closer look at. So let's talk about hybrid cultures. There are a few restrictions that you will have to keep in mind before you are able to form a hybrid culture. First, the culture you want to form a hybrid with has to be present within your realm. No weird hybridization with cultures on the other side of the world, please. Secondly, you'll need a certain amount of cultural acceptance. You cannot go in and conquer an area to only create a new culture immediately, but the required amount can vary depending on your current traditions. And finally, you cannot hybridize with a culture of the same heritage as you. The reason here is that the two cultures have to be different enough to warrant them being combined into a single culture, rather than just assimilating one in favor of the other. So, the way I see this, it's actually quite perfect. What we have right here, the first step again, is that you need to have it present in your realm. It makes sense, you know, you need something that your culture is actually active with, interacting with, and so on and so forth. I think that makes a lot of sense, meaning that when you hop, let's say from, you know, Montagu, so you are Hastine, and you hop all the way to India, you can't just arrive and immediately say, and we're a hybrid culture now. No, you have to foster some sort of understanding. It is a long-term process that occurs there, and I think that is perfectly fine. Now, the second thing, the cultural acceptance, makes a lot of sense as well. If you go there and you suppress them, then you're basically wiping their culture out. You're not accepting them, you're not forming them into something that can meld together with you. You are just essentially getting rid of it, so that also is very sensible. Makes it so that, you know, there's very little cheese involved. It is primarily something that is indeed roleplay focused. And then the other one is that you cannot hybridize with anything that has the same heritage as you. Now this one I think I'm happy with. It just depends primarily on how widespread these cultural groups, so that is now what we call heritages, really are. And by that I mean primarily that when I'm looking at a situation, right, where a Norse invader attacks, for example, the Netherlands, or they attack even East Francia, right? What we're looking at there is, I just hope that basically East Francia is Central Germanic, and then, of course, the Norse are North Germanic. I completely get it if, you know, you have a situation where you're looking at a German culture conquering another German culture. Obviously, there's no hybridization necessary there. They already are in the same heritage, in the same culture group. That makes a lot of sense. It really just depends in certain areas of the map on how widespread a single culture group is, because that could completely exclude you from ever having a hybrid culture. But honestly, I'm not very worried, because so far it looks like the heritages are quite spread out and quite split up, I should say, making it so that you can just go on and essentially say, hey, you know what, the Norse can hybridize with the Germans, and so on and so forth, despite both, of course, being Germanic, but, you know, North and West and Central Germanic. We pick a default name that is a combination of the two cultures you're attempting to hybridize, such as Andaluso-French or Greco-Persian, for added immersion and flavor. However, we have a set of names that can appear depending on which culture you hybridize or where you're creating a new culture. For example, hybridizing a culture of a Frankish heritage, so Frankish is basically West Germanic, I guess, with one of a Central Germanic heritage in the area in and surrounding Lotharingia, you can have a culture named Rhinelander. You are, of course, free to name a new culture whatever you want as well. So basically, you have certain areas, you have certain cultures that if they bind together, that can make a very specific name, but you can also just type those names in. We got Afghan, Kashmiri right here. You can freely pick between the two cultures pillars, mixing ethos, heritage, language, and martial custom as you'd like. For example, you could pick the heritage from culture A, but language from culture B. One caveat is that you have to pick at least one pillar from each culture. It isn't much of a hybrid otherwise. Of course, if you go in and you just select everything of one culture, then it doesn't really make sense. Just convert to that culture at that point. Now, the interesting thing here is indeed that we can change ethos this way, but you have to pick one that is already present. I think that is fine. I think that we're looking at something where ethos, of course, could be a bit more flexible, but I do think that when you unite cultures, you know, because this isn't Divergence, we're going to get to Divergence in a second, when you unite cultures, you basically make something that is influenced by both of those, and, you know, picking an ethos there that works is perfectly reasonable. You can see as well here that if you take over a different culture, rather if you hybridize two different cultures, you take over the innovations that your culture already lacks, so that you have something then that really is the best of both worlds. The acceptance here, you can see that as well, goes to 100%, meaning that even the old cultures actually really like one another, because, you know, just makes sense. They just formed a hybrid. They were so connected and so united that they could form a hybrid, making it so that they, of course, are very close at this point. The new culture will be created with you as the culture head, of course, makes perfect sense as well. You can see that only 2 out of 4 vassals will convert. I wonder what that directly will depend on. Is it just, you know, opinion? Is it so that if a vassal likes you, they will always convert? Or is it related to, I don't know, maybe somebody, you know, has prestige, maybe somebody has piety, you know, whatever maybe matches the ethos, for example. That is something that we don't know yet. It is quite interesting, of course. We also got Indo-Aryan and Iranian here as the heritage. You can choose between one of the two. And now we have language, Kashmiri and Scythian, and this is confirmed later on in the thread as well. But I really want to say, so this is not a feature, or rather it will not be a feature, but what I would like to see, and this is the one fairly big caveat in my opinion that I have with this system, is I would like to see 3 middle steps. So what I mean is that you basically have the choice between Scythian and between Kashmiri, and then in between that are 3 steps where it is 75% Kashmiri, 25% Scythian, 50-50, and then 25% Kashmiri and 75% Scythian. Why would I want that? Basically, I would want that so that we can then have a benefit with both cultures depending on how much we have the language in there. You know, I could, for example, say, hey, I have a 50-50, meaning that I only get 50% of the malus of not speaking Kashmiri and 50% of the malus of not speaking Scythian. Right now, it would be 100%. I would love to see that. I know it's not going to be in this. They explained that in the thread. We're going to get to that once the dev diary is over. Then we're going to take a look at the actual, you know, dev comments in the thread. But that is definitely something that I would like to see. We have also the martial custom here. Right now it is min only. I wonder, I mean, I guess both at this point have min only, you know, as their standard, so nobody has equal or women only, making it so that you can only pick min only because, you know, there is nobody of the hybridizing cultures that have that. Now, what I want to direct your attention to, oh, this is the color. Yeah, this must be the color, right? Oh, that is great. Yeah, you can pick your color. I love that. But look at this. Creating a hybrid culture is pretty cheap. 735 prestige is less prestige than you need to do a kingdom tier invasion. That is crazy. That is crazy. And I love it. Why do I love it? I love it so much because this means that this hurdle can actually be taken by the AI. We have certain decisions that the AI will never take because the hurdles are simply too demanding. I think the most well-known decision there is basically the decision to form the HRE that is impossible for the AI ever to achieve. I wish it weren't so, but I have never seen the HRE form as the AI. You know, I've done so many observer games, I've played so many games just in general. It never happens. I think this is one of those things where not excluding the AI from being able to pull this off without having to cheese, without having to min-max is a great idea, because cultures in this case I think are primarily roleplay, and seeing diverging and hybridizing cultures all over the world, you know, if you set the settings right, we're going to get to that in a second, is the right setting. Let's take a look at this. Each ruler can only form, oh yeah, there's an M missing, don't worry about it, a hybrid culture once. The new culture will be unable to form a new hybrid for 50 years. That is perfectly reasonable. You know, when you create a new culture, you can't just move on and then in 10 years later you have another culture. I do think there could be something there. I think it might be too complex. I think it's really just to feed my own desires, if you will. But there could be something there where it says 50 years, or you are, for example, at least, you know, let's say 30 provinces away from where this culture was created, right? If you create a new Norse-Persian culture in Persia and then you move on into the steppes, go to Mongolia, what says that I can't just say, hey, Mongolia gets a new culture immediately because we moved on, right? We're entirely somewhere else. We're no longer the same culture because we live completely in a completely different space. But the interesting thing to me about this is, and maybe I overread it in the dev there, but I don't think so, even if you can't form another hybrid culture currently, you can still divert. Meaning that you could divert in Mongolia. That is definitely possible. That is something that you could do. Very exciting. I think this is great. The 50 years gives you a bit of a lock there. You know, it makes it so that you can't just keep hybridizing and hybridizing and hybridizing. Great stuff. Seriously, I love this. You can pick and choose which traditions you want to keep from either culture, as long as you don't go above the slot limit. You can even choose to only pick a few traditions, leaving slots empty and give room for future traditions that you may want to adopt later. Big fan of this. You can, change it around via the hybridization. You can form a truly different culture by having traditions that neither of the cultures had, by you opening up the tradition slots in the hybridization process. Some traditions are unique to certain cultures, regions, or heritages, however, so this is the only chance you might have to acquire traditions that normally would be out of your reach. Let's take a look at this right here. We got Futua, so everything that has this yellow glowing frame, golden glowing frame is selected. We got esteemed hospitality, Futua, we got equal inheritance, we got Himalayan settlers, and we got refined poetry. We did not select mountain homes and loyal soldiers. I can only assume, actually it doesn't have to be ordered. But I would assume at the end of the day that basically this is from one culture and this is from the other. And again, mountain homes and loyal soldiers are basically ignored here. Now, next up, aesthetics work in the same way. You're free to pick and choose all of the subcomponents from either culture. For some of the categories, you're even able to choose a hybrid option using the preset from both cultures. Amazing, I love it. The hybrid option exists for names, fashion, and coat of arms. Are you hybridizing a culture from East Africa with an Indian culture? Perhaps you'd like to go for the Indian unit, hybrid naming, Indian architecture, African fashion, and finally, hybrid coat of arms. Actual combination is entirely up to you. I love this. I really, really do. I think this is the sort of stuff, it has zero gameplay impact, but it is certainly something where I can say, for example, we will be marching primarily with Indian. Let's say I select, I'm an Arabic ruler, so Arabic applies to me. Let's say I assume Afghan is the Arabic using culture. They're obviously not an Arabic culture, but they utilize the assets of the Arabic cultures or culture group. Let's say our soldiers are primarily sourced from the Indian subcontinent, making it so that we're looking at a situation where we use the Indian stuff. But now, I could go with hybrid if I say there are both Afghan and Kashmiri nobles involved in this. But what if I say, you know what, no, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to say that there are only Afghan nobles. This has no gameplay impact whatsoever, but it makes it so that you can roleplay to what degree this is something driven by just one culture group's royalty, or driven by both. If they live truly together in a diverse realm, if you have Indian vassals, if you have Afghan vassals, this is something that I fully endorse. I also actually like the menu. I'm not sure about this menu here when it comes to the pillars, primarily because it's so empty. Yeah, I don't know, it's just so empty. This could be maybe a bit more glamorous. It doesn't look exactly very glamorous, does it? But this one is, I love this so much. And yeah, again, you can choose between coat of arms. We sadly can't see it. Oh no, actually, they scroll down. Here we go, look at this. We got the hybrid fashion where people will wear both of these outfits. We got the, with a community flavor pack and with the ethnicities and portraits expanded mods. This will be truly amazing. This will be so good. So much variety, so much glamour going on there. I am a huge fan of all of this. Then down here we have the coat of arms, of course, what they primarily select, what the themes are, what sort of animals, they depict, what sort of traditional things they depict. Yeah, great stuff, seriously. And again, I want to stress, it is quite cheap to hybridize if you reach the acceptance that is necessary to do it. Let's take a look at this. The new hybrid culture will automatically acquire any innovation that either parent culture has discovered already, giving you the possibility to gain access to innovations that your previous culture has yet to discover. Normally, creation isn't very expensive and relies more on having enough cultural acceptance for it to be valid. A high acceptance will reduce the cost, though, making it fairly cheap if you have managed to greatly increase acceptance. I think this makes a lot of sense. Imagine yourself as a ruler that says, hey, we've lived here, maybe we've invaded, let's use the classic example of the Norse. We've invaded here, but we've lived here for 1 or 2 generations, and I am powerful. I am strong, I have an insane amount of prestige, so I can unite these cultures, even if the cultures don't quite feel comfortable with one another, and then over time, this united culture will spread out. Or you have a situation where just, hey, we've lived here for 5, 6 generations, we've established a great, unified and harmonious situation, and because of that we can just naturally meld together. So you have either this thing that you can force as a player, where you say, hey, I have the minimum amount of acceptance and I can now push this through, or where you say, I have the maximum amount of acceptance and I can just do it without really having a prestige cost. The interesting thing here is that that is something that the devs want. So this two-pronged approach that you can take when and how you unify this culture has an impact, because let's take a look at this. The initial size of a hybrid culture on the map also depends on the acceptance that you have built up between the two cultures. So again, you can merge them at the minimum acceptance that is required for this, or at the maximum, for example, right? And depending on when you merge it, it impacts just how many cultures or how many counties flip. I really do. I hope that this also impacts how many of your vassals of either culture actually flip as well, rather than just opinion, right? That is something that I would be looking forward to. If you decide to hybridize at the lowest required acceptance level, the hybrid will start out rather small. Again, I hope that this doesn't just impact counties, but that it also impacts how many of your vassals will flip. Rulers of hybrid cultures have a much easier time using the Promote Culture Council task in counties belonging to either of its parent cultures for a set of amount of years after it has been formed. Yeah, great. When they say that it is easier for you to promote culture in a location that is either, you know, Afghan or, sorry, what was it? Kashmiri. I would like this to be the case, and this is a bit off topic, but I would like this same mechanism be the case for the Euro integration. There is a chancellor task that does that, right? But if you create a new kingdom, and I was thinking about this, I was talking about this on Reddit just very recently. If you create a new kingdom, let's say, that is made up of duchies that come from Pomerania, East Francia, and Poland, there's no way for the Polish king, for the German king, or for the Pomeranian king to take those territories back into their de jure, because, you know, you're just a new kingdom. There's no response that they can give. There's also no response that you can give as a new kingdom if you want to integrate more duchies that you have just recently conquered after creating the kingdom into your new kingdom. If you have a new kingdom, it should be fairly fluid in its de jure existence, right? If you get conquered immediately, this should be wiped off the map. If you create a new kingdom and 10 years later it's gone, that kingdom should no longer be recognized by anybody, and yet it is. So what I'm saying is, Promote culture will be faster for whatever culture was involved in creating your new hybrid culture. I think that is great. I think that if Poland conquers a duchy that you took from them by creating your new kingdom, they should have the same effect for integrating that duchy into their de jure territory. Okay? I think that would be great. I think that would make a lot of sense. That would make it so that you can come back and basically say, hey, we have this situation where the Euro is a bit more fluid, a bit more interactive, and where there is a response for the kingdom that just lost a duchy because you stole it from them, basically, right? I think this Promote Culture Council task is really a good example of how you can respond to this, and I think that is exactly what they should be doing. I hope that we're going to see that eventually. Now, hybridization comes to an end right here, and I have to tell you, it looks amazing. I'm a huge fan of this. I mentioned the language thing, right? That is something that I did bring up, and I think beyond that, hybridization looks absolutely outstanding. Seriously, this is a massive change for the better when it comes to culture. It gives you a lot of freedom. It gives the AI a lot of freedom. We're going to see that later down. Huge fan. Already 17 minutes in, Jesus. Diverge your culture, let's talk about this. Similar to forming a hybrid, you get to choose a name for your new culture. The default name here, on the other hand, depends on your primary title. Diverging your culture as the King of Anatolia can give you an Anatolian culture, or Austrian if you're the Duke of Austria. This makes sure that divergent cultures always have a sensible name to them, at least most of the time. I did see a Wormsian culture in a recent Observer game from the county of Worms. Amazing. The worms are everywhere. As with hybridization, you are free to name it however you want if you don't want to use the default name. You can pick and choose any ethos. That is amazing. Makes it so that I can sit literally locally wherever I am and then just say I'm going to diverge and have a different ethos, you know, have a different thing going on. You can be the King of France and then push French as a whole into this new situation where they are all of a sudden, for example, courtly. Sorry, they will probably start out with courtly. What I mean is stuff like egalitarian or bellicose. Language won't have any additional options for you most of the time. Now, this is an interesting sentence. I wonder what it means. Do you have any ideas? What I can imagine here is that when they say most of the time, let's envision us again as a Norse ruler. We conquered all of Brittany. We have like a couple of provinces that are Norse in Brittany itself, and we want to diverge. We do not want to hybridize with Brittany. We want to diverge. But since we have so many, you know, cultural provinces of Breton in our realm, maybe we are able to choose Breton as a language? Just because we are ruling over so many subjects. We're not going to adopt any of the other traditions. Of course, why would we? We are Norse, we're great, right? But maybe that gives you an option. It does say most of the time. Maybe what they maybe mean rather here is if you're Norse, it might give you access to stuff like Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and so on. I'm not entirely certain. This is, again, language is like the one thorn in my side, and it is not large enough to make me angry or upset about this, but yeah, I wonder what that means. Martial custom can be changed as long as you fulfill the conditions for them, which would include things such as having a corresponding succession law. Aesthetics will also rarely have additional options, except in some historical cases. Diverging from Norse in Sweden, for example, will give you access to aesthetics, maybe also to Swedish language. I assume so, maybe. You have to change at least one pillar in order to diverge your culture. Most of the time, you want to have a lot of valid alternatives for the additional pillars, so your only option will be to change your ethos. Of course, it makes a lot of sense if the language is always the same, if the martial custom most of the time is the same, and if the aesthetics most of the time are the same, then indeed the ethos is the only thing right there. You can also see acceptance. This is for beta Israeli, so that is in Ethiopia and most likely Jewish. You have a situation where they will still like one another. Of course, they are basically brothers. They are, similar to Franconian, for example, and Bavarian. Yeah, look at this. Cost still very, very low. It can go very, very high. We're going to see that in a second, but very, very low. Each ruler can only diverge a culture once. This divergent culture cannot have another culture diverge from it for 200 years. 200 years is a long time. Much, much longer than 50. But in all honesty, changing your ethos to something entirely new is a fundamental culture shift. And I think 200 years honestly are appropriate. It does not say, and I hope that I am right here, it does not say that diverging locks you out of hybridization for 200 years. If I can conquer a new territory, let's say I made it as a Norse character to sub-Saharan Africa, and I diverge my Norse culture, right? I should still be able to then have a hybrid culture from this Norse culture right after. That is at least how I see it. Let's say you arrive as a bellicose culture, you arrive there as a Norse culture, you become inventive, and then you say, hey, my friends, with my sub-Saharan empire in Ghana, for example, I would like to adopt a different ethos yet again. I would like to adopt some different traditions. I don't think that should stand in the way there, because first of all, we are no longer the same Norse that we were in Scandinavia, but at the same time, we are then, of course, later on merging. I really, really hope that hybridization does not then limit you in divergence, and I hope that divergence does not limit you in hybridization. That is basically what I'm looking at here. That is something that I definitely am very eager to learn more about. I hope that I'm correct here, because that would be great. Traditions can be replaced with something new as long as you are able to afford the tradition costs. So you basically pay what you would also be paying if you just picked a new tradition in general. Unlike hybridization, you will have plenty of options and can replace a tradition with any other tradition that your culture fulfills the requirements for. So basically, what we have right here is just the base idea, where you go and say, this is the same process as if I was just a part of my old culture and picked a new tradition. It's the same cost, it's the same initiative, and so on. You can pick anything that is available to you, be it because of your region, because of your heritage, or just in general, and then you can just pay the cost there, and you can see the cost went up from, 800 to 10,800, because they picked mountain skirmishing and they picked adaptive skirmish. As you can see, there is no list here. I assume, basically click this and then you see an additional window with a list that says, hey, what do you want to get? On the other end, up here, we have the situation where it's marked, and you can see pick up to 6 tradition. Right now 5 are selected, and these 5 are lit up, so these will not be picked. So this is the very, very limited list of hybridization tradition pick. Great stuff. I'll be honest with you, I'm a huge fan, yet again. It's a huge cost, but again, you can bring that down if you fulfill the requirements, if you, adaptive skirmishers or mountain skirmishing. If you have mountains in your realm that are your culture, then you have surely a lower cost than 3,500 prestige, which is huge. But yeah, I hope you get where I'm coming from. Diverging also costs prestige. Here the cost scales of how much your own culture you control. This is really neat. Attempting to diverge Greek as Byzantium, because you control so much Greek land, will be fairly expensive. Because what you're doing is you're not just diverging, a tiny part of Greek. For example, if you migrate, to Finland as a Greek character and then have 2 provinces in Greek that are Greek in Finland, you will only be diverging those provinces. But if you're Byzantium, you are applying a huge culture shift to the entire culture of Greek. Meaning, that, of course, that should be a bit more expensive. Meanwhile, attempting to diverge a small part of your culture, such as a small Andalusian emir on the Iberian Peninsula, will be significantly cheaper. Yeah, that is great stuff. I think this is a great balancing act that they have found here. I was very, very skeptical about the balancing when it comes to this entire thing, and of course, none of the numbers are final. When it comes to the actual act of balancing, it is always a day-to-day sort of business. You have to see how players react, you have to see how the AI reacts, and so on and so forth. But in general, this idea that the smaller a section of your culture you divert, the cheaper it is, the more sense does it make to me. Now let's talk about dynamic culture emergence. For dynamic divergent cultures, we decided that we wanted them to feel immersive and logical whenever they showed up. There are many factors that go into this, such as the culture size, if the culture is united under strong rulers, etc. Divergent cultures will appear either in border regions where a culture meets another or several others, or in island regions. Divergences also do not appear in the capital lands of the culture head in order to safeguard what is most likely the heartland of the culture. This is great. Otherwise, we would be running into culture border go. In this case, let's say you as the Khazars conquer, I don't know, Poland, and then you install Khazar people in Poland, and they will flip those territories. Those territories will be Khazar, but they will be isolated, right? They won't be where the Khazar homelands are in the steppes. And that means that it should be cheaper and that it should be more likely that the local lords that you put into power try to diverge. Now, they could also hybridize, but if they diverge, then they diverge, and I think that does make a lot of sense. For example, one of the cultures that usually diverge a few times in 1066, so when you start in 1066, is the Bedouin culture. It's large, spread out, and some of its lands are under rulers that are not Bedouin themselves. On the other hand, we have a Greek, a large culture, but with practically all counties of its culture united under one ruler. They tend to not diverge unless territories go independent. Works beautifully. This looks like it actually is absolutely sensible. Listen. I said this earlier, I love to complain. I love to come up with ideas where I say, haha, outsmarted you again. I know I said something you didn't see coming. But I gotta tell you, this sounds great. If a culture has a culture province of its own in a completely isolated territory, if a culture has cultural territories that are far from its heartlands, of course they would diverge. Of course they would maybe speak slightly funny, maybe they would go on wear different clothings, maybe, I don't know, they would have different traditions, different ethos, and so on and so forth, because they have a different experience from the heartlands of your culture. Great stuff. Hybridization, on the other hand, is something powerful rulers strive towards, so this is something that they actively want to do. If a ruler finds themselves ruling a large swath of land of a foreign culture, while at the same time having no motivation to assimilate, they'll try and increase cultural acceptance until they're eligible for hybridization. They tend to want to hybridize with large cultures in their realm, the prime example being the Oghuz Seljuks wanting to hybridize with Persian above all other cultures they have in their realm. Sounds great. Some AI rulers do not pursue hybridization though, such as large elective realms like the HRE, where cultures take turns being the top ruler, or realms such as the papacy. Now you might say, it's all nice and good that they say this is how it's going to work, because that was also my thought. I was like, yeah, like we've heard a lot of talk about a lot of features, but how does it actually work out though? Does it actually reflect like this? And, well, let's take a look at that, because this is a huge dev diary that also brings light onto that topic. How does it actually play out? By default, the AI will not create hybrids of hybrids, unless historical hybrids such as Maghrebi or English, as the naming schemes can quickly go out of hand. Though if you'd like the AI to do this, that's a game rule you can enable. There's also a small chance that hybrids appear in realms of not so powerful rulers. This allows interesting hybrids such as Hiberno-Norse to appear even from tiny realms. This happens through an event that can also occur for the player. These events will most often happen for cultures that have certain traditions that allow them to more easily create hybrids with other cultures. Very, very cool. Naturally, there's a host of game rules that allow you to customize your experience. Do you want no divergent or hybrid cultures to appear at all? Set their frequencies to none. Do you want the AI to create hybrids of hybrids of hybrids of hybrids? Set the hybrid culture restriction to very relaxed. Now, I'm really happy about this, because when it comes to game rules, have been a bit neglected over the course of CK3's lifespan. We got presets very not so long ago, but this one is very modular. Hybrid culture frequency, less common, fewer hybrid cultures will appear. Hybrid culture restrictions, to a degree, non-player created hybrid cultures can emerge from existing hybrid cultures. So this is hybrid of hybrid of hybrid of hybrid. Then we have divergent culture frequency relaxed. Divergent cultures will appear more often, with most of the harsher restrictions lifted, making it so that the AI will do it more often. You can actually tailor your game to do what you think makes for the best, for the most fun, for the most roleplay outcome. Let's take a look at this. Because I'll be honest with you, again, this dev diary blew me away just by how much every single section had me ask a question, and then the dev diary said, here's your answer. Let's take a look. To round things off, let's take a look at a few examples of what the AI did during an observer game. First up, from the 867 start and 200 years in, we'll see quite a few new cultures here. Now, they don't reveal which rules they are using, but I assume that this may actually be its very rules. We'll see. Anglo-Norse, hybrid culture emerged in 918. Cambro-Norse, hybrid culture formed in 948. Norse-Gael, hybrid culture emerged in 1029. You can also see that English has a largely replaced Anglo-Saxon as a dominant culture in England. Now, there's a question. How does English form? We're going to get to that when we get to the dev answers, but you can see it right here. Cambro-Norse, Anglo-Norse, Norse-Gael. I love it. I really, really love it. Now let's take a look at this. Started in 867 and 100 years into the game. Kufan, Bedouin divergence, emerged in 933. Badarayani, Mashriki divergence, emerged in 956. Purdu Mashriki, hybrid culture, emerged in 911. Nihawandi, Persian divergence, emerged in 907. And Shirvani, Persian divergence, emerged in 946. Look at them at the map right here. We got Kufan, we got Badrayani, we got Nihawandi, and where is... there it is, Shervani. I hereby, and I just realized this, if there is a dev watching this, please, do me the favor, I beg of you, with this culture update, we need an actual Seljuk invasion. Please, do me the favor. I don't know why it's not in the game, but if you start in 867, the Seljuks never show up to then mix Oghuz and Persian. Please, do me the favor. With this patch, with this update, with the expansion, please bring in the Seljuks. I am dying to see the Seljuks in 867. Listen, folks, if you want the Seljuks to be in and to actually make an appearance and not just be in 1066, please leave a comment. Please. This issue has irked me so much, and I didn't even realize this, but looking at this, isn't this amazing for the Seljuks to come in and be like, hey, look at all these cultures, and now we're gonna mix Oghuz. You know, we're gonna bring it in there. Right now in the game, if you weren't aware, the Seljuks never spawn in 867. They never spawn as invaders. Please, devs, bring in the Seljuks. We need the Seljuks, we need them now, and we need them soon. In another game started in 1066, a Swedish noblewoman was made queen in the newly established Kingdom of Jerusalem following a successful crusade. After a few generations, the local cultures merged into what would become Mashriki Swedish, ushering the kingdom into a new era of prosperity. I love it. Look at this, Swedish and Mashriki in the year 1246, so it actually reads that here, which I'm a huge fan of. We got the Arabic language, North Germanic heritage, marshalmen only, Mashriki Swedish aesthetic, so a hybrid. Then we got forest fighters, stand and fight, fervent temple builders, Mubarizun, then some others that I can't see. Culture had you. Rule of this culture that has the most Mashriki Swedish counties in. As mentioned earlier, oh wait, this is actually interesting. I hope this doesn't mean that hybridization forbids divergence. Really hope it doesn't. Anyway, as mentioned earlier, we have a number of historical names for cultures that can appear in different specific circumstances. If you have any cultural names that would make sense for a divergent or hybrid culture, let me know. Who knows? Perhaps your suggestion ends up in the game. This was an amazing dev diary. This is an amazing feature. The best culture system that we have ever had by far in a grand strategy game. I have my two caveats. That's the language that I brought up, where I would like to see a mix that then impacts the malus to a certain degree that you get for not speaking language. And I would also like to see Seljuks, please. Put in the Seljuks. I beg you. Now let's move on to the dev responses right here. Right, looks all great, just one question. Does this mean we will not get language development? For example, how a diverging culture on a Mediterranean island could develop a new language from Arabic, just as an example. Correct. We wanted to keep languages fairly simple in their approach. As such, we didn't introduce new languages over the course of a campaign. Yeah. This is the caveat that it's confirmed. You know, it is what it is. I'm not happy about it, but the rest of the system is so great, I can forgive it. I do hope that at some point we may see language revisited though. So how does this work with historical cultures such as English? The existing decisions and events to form specific cultures such as English, Sicilian, the Norse split and so on will still use their respective event and or decision. They are, however, incorporated into the new system to be properly presented as being a hybrid or divergent culture. When created, they still draw from the scripted culture in the database to give you the same preset with pillars and traditions. This is really interesting, because it means that even in mods, you can still script hybrid cultures to happen if you really want them. Right? This is still something that can happen. For example, the Fallen Eagle can go and do scripted cultures that are Frankish and Roman, or rather Gaul-Roman, right? Those things can happen and those things will happen. So I'm a big fan of that is still possible, but they will use the new system, of course. Outremer, on the other hand, is a bit different. We haven't quite settled on how we wanted to handle it at the moment, so I can't give you a definitive answer on that yet. Of course, Outremer is what you get if you mix a European culture in Outremer, which means overseas in French, I was told. With the local cultures. But there's so many cultures there, I do wonder how Outremer will eventually work. Is there going to be a separate language map mode? Maybe a bit superfluous if it's also a tooltip info for the culture map mode, but it be neat nonetheless. Maybe. It's something we have on our wish list, but we'll also have to see if something we actually have the time for. So I cannot promise anything at the moment. I would really like a language map. Please, please, please. I would even like to see an ethos map mode. That sort of stuff is kind of cool. Yes, what is this? It looks like you've got a missing... Oh, right. It's all good. I'm going to reload this page real quick just to see whether there are more dev answers. You need to be an independent ruler to diverge. You do not. That is great news. That is, of course, what we talked about earlier as well. We saw that in the screenshots, so that works perfectly. Cultures all have different ethnicities set in script. When you form a hybrid culture, we consolidate these values to give you something in between. Very, very Cool. It means that Swedish Mashriki people are actually Swedish Mashriki people. Of course, this only applies to generated characters. Children always get the ethnicity of their parents. There are several triggers and effects for checking and changing both pillars and traditions, so very, very moddable indeed. May I suggest adding 3D models of a boat next to the unit in military equipment? As of right now, I reckon only the Norse have a unique boat design, but I'm sure that there will be more. Yeah, that is actually a great idea as well. Hopefully this will solve the problem of the I just never changing culture, even when independent. In my most recent non-Iron Man game, I was manually swapping characters when I granted a vassal independence to force them to change to the culture and make their realm more stable. The AI can indeed cause some havoc if you want to. Which is one of the reasons for us wanting to have the AI a bit restricted as the default game rule. If you want to use the relaxed option, you can let the AI go nuts, but don't say I didn't warn you. Oh my god. Greco, Guardan, Exilio. Is that Greco again? Yamo, Bepsian. Look at this. Yeah, okay. I can see the concerns. There's a certainly possibility. What is this? The name Middle Eastern, right, they want to rename it, that's fine, that's not that important. No, did nobody ask for whether they lock each other out? Will hybrids and divergent cultures get access to currently culturally unique decisions like uniting Italy or forming Greater Armenia? That's a great question. All previous requirements that needed you to be a specific culture or culture group have been updated to accommodate the new system. For example, a decision might require you to have a certain heritage, or it might need you to be of that culture or have the culture as your historical parent culture. Oh, that is so cool. So you can come in as Norse into Italy, become Norse Italian, and choose the, either you have the parent culture Italian, making it so that you are eligible to form Italy, or you make it so that you become the heritage Latin maybe, or Italian, and then you have a situation where you can still take the decision. This was a great dev diary. I really want to say thank you to, I believe this is Emil Tisander here behind Servancourt. Great stuff. Let me know what you think. You've heard my complaints. I will complain about this on Twitter, on the Discord. I will be everywhere complaining about language and about the Seljuks. But that's literally... This is an outstanding feature. I, personally, am extraordinarily happy about what we're getting here. I hope so are you. If not, if you have more criticism, let me know in the comments. I read them all. And I think this feature, being as big as it is, requires every single shred of feedback that can be given, so do go ahead and hand it out. Again, I will read it all and I'll be annoying and ping some of the devs on Twitter. Now that being said, thank you all for watching. Please do have a debate. Please do let me know whether you disagree or agree with me in the comments. And for the moment, I would just like to thank the members of the channel, namely the Barons, the Counts, and the Dukes. I truly appreciate your wonderful support, and with that, see you later. The Gator.